Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 Episode 3 Ghosts of Illyria. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Strange New Worlds up to Season 1 Episode 3. If you have not seen this episode in its entirety, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, God damn it. I continue to be blown away by Strange New Worlds. Like, this show is going to be amazing. I am already ready to rank it among the best of the new Star Trek shows. And honestly, if this season keeps going like this could be in a contender in my top 5 for favorite seasons of the entire Star Trek franchise. That is how much I am loving this show so far. Now, this episode, Ghosts of Illyria, some people might classify it in the standard, we got a weird virus aboard the ship type episode, which is a trope that Star Trek loves to do and has done many a times before. Makes me wonder how my sister's going to feel about this episode, because I know she hates that trope or got sick of it. Because, yeah, you got episodes like The Naked Time in the original series where they spread around this virus that makes them drunk. Or, was it Deep Space Nine had that virus that made people talk word salad and not say the words correctly. Babel, I believe that episode was called. And then Voyager, Voyager had a couple, and TNG did as well. You know what I'm saying. This is a trope. Now, I said some could classify this episode as one of those virus type episodes, but I would not. Now, it was certainly, it could be classified in that, sure, and it was at first looking to me like it would be one of those episodes where, oh no, there's a virus on this ship, and everyone's spreading it around. In fact, I kind of felt at first, I thought that number one was going to be the Riker. You remember, one of my biggest complaints, and it pisses me off every time I watch this episode, but The Naked Now and Next Generation, which is a bad episode overall, but one of the things that pissed me off most about it is how Riker doesn't get the fucking virus and everyone else does. In fact, Riker passes it on to someone who passes it on to someone who passes it on to someone. They're instantly drunk, and yet Riker is like in command of the facilities and doesn't get drunk at all, even though he should be. He got the fucking virus, so that pissed me off. So at first I thought that they were doing the same thing with number one. I was like, oh wow, they're gonna make number one is gonna be the Riker, who's also number one, but it's going to be the Riker of the show, where she's not, even though she got the virus immediately because she beamed down the planet, she's not going to show symptoms. But they gave a perfectly good explanation as to why, and it fit into the story. So no, she wasn't the Riker, because that was a terrible episode. This is a good one. And the main reason though why I would say I would not shove this into that category with those other episodes, and if I did, this would probably end up being the best top ranked out of all those episodes, is because it wasn't really about the virus to me. The virus was just the setting of the stage. It was about the character stories, and that what this episode was for. First and foremost, in fact, this is what the show has been first and foremost. It uses the backdrop of exploring space, exploring strange new worlds, being in the Starfleet ship. That's the setting, but the heart of what the show is about the characters. And that is something Enterprise should learn from. That's why Enterprise sucked, because their characters were flat and uninteresting. And it's also something even a Discovery... It does this to mixed reviews, mixed results. Same with Picard Season 1, Season 2, of course. The characters were nonsense. I had no connection to any of the characters, even the already established ones like Picard and 7-9. But anyway, not here to talk about that dumpster fire. That's always, for me, any show I review ever, no matter what the genre, sci-fi, Star Trek, non-Star Trek, non-sci-fi, drama, comedy, character stories are always first for me. And this is a strong character story show. And this episode is very, very strong in the character stories. I will say, 3 episodes in to Strange New Worlds, and I already know more about the characters than I did after 4 seasons of Discovery. Like, I feel like they're more fleshed out, or at least the ones they address. There's some they haven't gotten to yet, like Ortega, but I have high hopes that by the end of the season they will, because they did such a fucking good job addressing the ones they did. Like, in the first episode it was mainly Pike, and the second episode is mainly Uhura, and this episode is mainly Una, or number 1. God damn. They do such a good job! And even like the supporting cast throughout these episodes are still, even though some of them haven't been as fleshed out yet, they're still come off very strongly. Like Himmer came off very strongly in this episode. Spock as well in the previous episode. You got a strong thing for Spock and for Lieutenant, I kind of learned how to pronounce her names. One of these days, it's like Leon or something like that. It's like L-A''A'. But anyway, you got a strong sense of their characters as well. In this episode, you get a bit of a strong sense. It's just a strong character story. Like in 3 episodes, they've done more to explore characters than like the entire 4 seasons of Enterprise and Discovery. Fuck, I lump those together. And freaking, Picard, of course. Even season 1. I mean, now, one thing I did want to point out about the show in general and why I feel like I like it better, that is by far the best of these newer Trek shows. I feel like I'm worried that people are going to take the wrong lesson from it and say that it's because it's episodic. And I don't mind the fact that it's episodic. I'm all good with it, but I feel like Discovery and Picard failed at doing serialized stories, but that does not mean that Star Trek cannot be serialized. Deep Space Nine, I would still argue to the teeth, it was mostly serialized. So was Enterprise, and I feel like even though TNG had the veneer of being episodic, they got away with serialization as much as they could back in that time period. Original series, yes, that was truly episodic, but that's one of my least favorites. Well, below Enterprise, of course. I mean, above Enterprise of the franchise. So I prefer Trek to be serialized. So I hope that's not the lesson they take away from this show. It's like, oh, we need to stop doing serialization. No, you don't necessarily. You just need to get better at it, because there's mystery of the season formats, and plus you could tell like most of these seasons of Picard and Discovery could be told in like 5 episodes, and you're stretching them out. And there's better ways to do serialized storytelling. Just look at shows like The Expanse, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and the first 6 seasons of Game of Thrones. So ignore this last 2, and you'll see good examples of serialized storytelling. So it can be done. So I hope that's not the lesson they take away. The lesson that they should take away, and when I realized when watching this episode, specifically what I like about it more than any of the newer Trek shows, well, particularly Discovery Picard, is that it's slow paced. The pacing, it takes its time and has moments to let the show breathe. And this has to do with not only the cinematography, but also the pace in which the scenes are set and the way the dialogue's set. Discovery and Picard, especially Discovery, is following more of the format of the Kelvin Trek movies, which I don't like, except for Beyond. And actually, Into Darkness was decent, but that first one was a giant piece of shit. Most people were like, oh, the first one was decent, but the second one sucked. No, you got it opposite all the way around. But anyway, they're taking the lesson, they're having that sort of format, and I talked about this a bit in my review of Discovery, because especially I noticed the premiere episode of season 4 did this, but they actually do it a lot, where it's just like really fast paced, where the camera's spinning, they have a character walk very fast past the screen, and they talk like that, and another character blah 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 blah. In fact, if you watch any of the scenes of almost all the scenes of Discovery, like they have a few peeled back scenes, but the vast majority of scenes are very like characters just. It's very kinetic. Like the character's like, oh, we should do this. Yeah, if we do this, we do that. Yeah, if we do this, we do that. Oh, what if we do this? And the camera usually spins around to follow the characters. Where it's very hyperactive. It's very, it's very low attention span. Blah blah blah. And that's not what Star Trek has been historically. Historically, it's been Picard's, sitting in his ready room saying, "So, Mr. Data, how was your day?" And Data's like, "Well, I've done these calculations," and blah, blah, blah. And Geordi's like, "Well, yes, but I've also done the calculations," and Captain, blah, blah. Like this slower, not a constant, oh, blah, 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 the way the Discovery does. And that's what I noticed about this show. That's what the takeaway should be. Not, let's have to be episodic kick-out serialization. The takeaway should be slow the fucking pace down, keep the camera in one fucking place, stop spinning it around and constantly moving. You don't need to be kinetic. In fact, that's what a lot of people state about Trek 2009, why they like it, and I think that's, again, they took the wrong lessons, and that's why they based Discovery off of it. But I think that was a shithole, to be honest. It's not like true to Star Trek, that kind of pacing. I don't think it works in the Star Trek setting, and it's just distracting. It's for people with no attention spans, and people. That's why it appeals more to mass audience, because a lot of the average viewer gets bored with someone like sitting there talking. So, Mr. LaForge. But that's fucking Star Trek. That's what Star Trek fans want, and I think that's what works best for Star Trek. And I noticed this episode, I really noticed that. Like, I don't think I quite put my finger on it before, even though I kind of bitched about the fast pace of Discovery before. But I definitely noticed that in this episode in particular, that the characters, it was paced well. The characters would talk. They would talk it out. They would. It wasn't constantly moving around. Like Discovery is actually hard to follow a lot because of this so fucking hyperactive. Like, stay in one place. And that is the lesson I hope they take away from Strange New World's success. Going forward, I hope they slow Discovery down. I hope they slow Picard down. Now, Lower Decks was also like that, because if you notice when I reviewed Lower Decks, I talked about how that also had a classic Star Trek feel, because they also had a slower, but sometimes they're quite kinetic, but that's for the comedy, and I'm a bit more forgiving. Like, it's not as dizzying when Lower Decks does it, because it's just a comedy reaction, but when they need to, they're really, purposeful with their pacing. And Prodigy is a kids show, so that's totally different. They're just doing it like a kids show, which is connection. So I have no problem with that. They do what they do. But Discovery and Picard, well, I've given up on Picard. But Discovery or any other new Trek shows that they make in the future, slow the fuck down. Learn that lesson from Strange New Worlds. That's why it works. Anyway, so, sorry, I just had to get that rant off my chest. Let's get into this episode in particular. So, goddamn, I love this episode, if I wasn't very clear about this. Because, yes, it starts off as a standard, like, oh, Spock and Pike are getting stuck on the planet. I kind of knew, like, the way the episode opened with them already on the planet and them trying to get back to the ship, I knew someone was going to get stuck behind, because you don't format your story that way without having someone stuck behind. And thankfully, I thought, and this has been a trap Star Trek has fallen into a lot before, where I think they have some boring episodes where they focus on people stranded on the planet. But thankfully, the Spock and Pike being left behind was the B story, and the A story took place on the ship with number one, and that is a character I've been really, really like. As soon as she came back to the ship and Pike wasn't there, I was like, "Oh, good, are we gonna get a number one episode?" Because this is a character we don't really know much about. We've seen before, and of course, it's a legacy track character, but appeared in only one episode and didn't have that much to do. So it's a character we know of or familiar with, but we don't really know. Like this, she's never really been explored before, and so I was really wanting a number one episode, and that's what I got, and it was a fucking good one. And also, like, you know, I think it really did not feel like a standard virus episode to me, even though at its core it really didn't feel like one, because it was different enough. Like, it was very interesting, especially the way they explored the situations of, people like going mad. You could say it's kind of like The Naked Now or whatever, and there's been a couple original Trek episodes like The Alien Web that had a situation where virus make people go mad. But the way they explored it, because they didn't focus too much on just people going mad, they said specifically they were trying to get light, and they didn't focus too much on the symptoms. It was more about M'Baga and Una trying to find a cure for it. And plus, like, at first I was a bit irritated with number one, because she obviously like had a huge thing where they had the light, and she was like, "Give me light," and she like glowed and then went away. And I thought I was pissed off with her because she was hiding this from Omega. I'm like, why don't you fucking tell him that you experienced the symptoms? But then when he examined her, said she was fine, I was like, wait a second, what's going on here? And then by the time we get to the end of the episode, it's perfectly explained. So and of course we know exactly why she was hiding that information. Actually made sense. It kind of frustrates me, and this happens in a lot of fiction, where characters don't dispel information that could easily help the plot, but they do it mainly so the plot can happen, but they have some bullshit excuse of why they didn't. If you just told someone this, then none of that bullshit would have happened. So I thought that was going to be the case here, but it wasn't. It turns out there was actually a really good explanation as to why she didn't share that information. So, goddamn, so I loved it. And then I love the way how they, as soon as they found out that this virus is spreading, and they had no fucking idea how, that the response was to put the whole ship in lockdown and do like a quarantine situation, which we're all familiar with after the whole pandemic thing, and I'm sure that's kind of inspired this reaction. It's something that seems familiar, and it does seem like, and I do feel like maybe there's a lot of examples in classic Trek in these virus episodes where they should have done something like this but didn't, and I'm not going to say, oh, this is inconsistent because they should be incompetent. No, like, I love how they sort of corrected this and be like, no, this is how we should react. There's some unknown virus spreading, we have no idea how or why, so we're going to clamp everything down and shut it all down right now. I love that. I thought that was absolutely great. And also I love Himmer in this episode, even though, again, he's not a main character, but just the way he's, I am a genius, and just this sort of arrogant demeanor or whatever. I got more of a grasp on his character, and I really like that as well. Especially how, like, the fact that he was a genius was a very bad thing when he was infected and was trying to get a light, so he found a way to beam a piece of the core of the planet up so he could get a lot of light. Oh my god, that was cool. And of course, Una was our Riker character who was unaffected and was the one going around. But again, actually a reason for it, not just bullshit writing. And she was the one going around. Although maybe a more apt comparison would be she was a Spock or Data character, because usually there's Spock or Data's immune to the virus, and so they're the ones going around, solving everything. And Deep Space Nine was Odo, and then in Voyager was the Doctor. They always have a character who is immune to viruses and go around. But anyway, oh yeah, in the Angel One, there was a side plot where there was virus and Crusher didn't get it for no reason whatsoever. So that's another example of that bullshit. But anyway, So, but yeah, I do love the format, and I loved how they explained it. Now, let's get into the big issue here. They revealed that number one is a Illyrian, who were the concept of us were introduced at the very start of this episode as a species that the Federation kind of is like, get away from me, because they embrace genetic enhancements, which is something the Federation is very, very anti against, and that ties into the theme of the episode, which I'll get to. I'll get to that. But and so they reveal that she's in fact genetically enhanced. She's what you may call an augment, but not from the Earth perspective, but from this Illyrian perspective. Now, and she reveals she is in fact an Illyrian. Now, do I feel like, because this is the comparison that could be drawn here, is the revelation in season 5. I gotta emphasize that 5 of Deep Space Nine, where it's revealed that Bashir is genetically enhanced and had been genetically enhanced as a child, which no, he wasn't. Which is a very obvious, very clunky, very poorly written, in my opinion, retcon. A very clear retcon that they had not planned, I don't think fits, and annoys me to no end. And in fact, that's one of the bigger complaints I have about what Deep Space Nine did. Of course, Vic Fontaine being the biggest, but I'm not getting into that. But yeah, and so that bothered me. And so is this like that? Am I also upset that they retconned number one's character? No, not at all. First of all, this is episode 3 of season 1, not episode 20 of season 5! So that makes a huge difference. Now, you could argue, but number one's an established character. We saw her. She was in the original series pilot, The Cage, and she was in Discovery. But she barely appeared in Discovery. She barely appeared in that pilot. So I would argue back that we don't really know this character, which is what I mentioned before. We know of her, but we never explored her. So they want to reveal that she's secretly an Illyrian and she's been hiding this the whole time. Fine. That makes perfect sense. I got 0 issues with that. And in fact, the way they did it in this episode that made it so good, like such a great character story, I definitely have no issues with that whatsoever. And it does give more flair to her character. And so now let me address the whole Illyrian thing, and how this episode, the theme of this episode was dealing with prejudice and bias. And I do love, and it does this in a really interesting way that's actually true to Roddenberry's vision. They explore that even though, and I love, and Vega even has like a speech about this, when she's like, oh, you don't want to use my blood because, you know, you're against the fact I'm genetically enhanced. He's like, I could give 2 shits. Like, I'm a doctor first. I'm all about curing people. It's the fact that you're genetically, your blood actually won't help. But if it would, I would use it in a heartbeat. And he has a speech about how prejudice is, perceived to be completely wiped out in the Federation because, humans of all races, creed, genders, whatever, are not discriminated against, and even other aliens of different species are not discriminated against, although McCoy might have something to say about that one, so maybe discriminated against a little bit, but not in this version anyway. And so he's like, so there's a perception, and we believe that prejudice has been eliminated entirely, but that's not entirely true because some prejudices still exist, and they point out the genetically enhanced ones, and that's also explored in how Leon, I don't know. Security chief's background and how she was taunted as a child because her last name is Nuning Sin. She's an ancestor of Khan, and by the way, they put that whole thing to bed of why. And I love how they state that it's flat out that she's just an ancestor and she's not actually an augment, which is whoosh. And in fact, number one's the augment, which is kind of a twist. But anyway. Yeah, it's a great way to explore prejudice and how they feel like prejudice had been eliminated, but it's not really. What is that commentary on? Is that commentary on people saying nowadays there's no such thing as racism? Maybe. Well, definitely. And it's great commentary because it's good commentary that should be made. And it does it in such a good way. This is like a classic Star Trek commentary. Not that bullshit they did in Picard season 2 where they were trying to blatantly be like, oh, they're destroying the planet. It's just bad social commentary. This is good social commentary. This is doing it. You're blatant about it, but you're doing it in a very clever, meaningful way. That's good storytelling and not just a line thrown out there just to make yourself feel good. The kind of shit that Deep Space Nine did in past tense, which great episodes, by the way. Anyway, so yeah, and the whole way in, especially Pike and his experience on the planet with Spock, where they find that the colonists were those glowy things, which that was obvious to me from the beginning, but that's all good because they realized it made him change his perception of Illyrians and how they were trying to, they wanted to join the Federation, so they were trying to change their nature to be more like them, to conform. And this episode actually does a good job of pointing out that the Federation are prejudiced against genetically enhanced beings because of their own bad experience with genetically enhanced beings. And that's actually consistent. Particularly speaking of that Bashir episode, which I fucking hate. But it did show that perception still exists in the 24th century. Although, they did let Bashir off with a slap on the wrist, which a lot of people were like against. But actually, this episode makes me feel better because it seems like letting him go with the slap on the wrist was the right thing to do. But anyway, and it shows that they progressed a bit from the 23rd century, which I don't think they would have let him go with a slap on the wrist in the 23rd century. So, but anyway, the speech that Pike gives when number one tries to resign. It is just, oh my god, it is why I love this character so much. He's instantly a contender for the best captain in Star Trek, and 3 episodes in, so I can't say it, but he could be my favorite captain. I'll just fucking say it. Like, that's, although Picard's speeches were amazing, so he does have some competition there, but what a great speech. I just fucking love his attitude on it. And she's like, but sir, if you don't reveal to Starfleet right now, you could go down with me. They could take you down too. And he's like, I welcome the fight. I want to have that argument because you're the best first officer I've ever had. And I'm like, oh, so fucking good. So good. But I also love number one's log entry, and then we're getting back to log entries in this show too, which I don't really care either, or I can do without. As some people miss the captain's logs, I don't really care one way or the other, but this works well for the show, and that's what I all care about. So if it works, use it. If you don't want to use it, fine, don't use it. I don't care. But I love the log entry she has at the end, where she says, well, yes, he thinks it's great and thinks I'm okay because I saved the ship and because I'm such a great first officer, but what if I wasn't? What if I wasn't such a great officer? Then he might be just as prejudiced against me as other people are. And that's actually a good point. A good point to reevaluate Starfleet and the Federation's principles and priorities, that they claim to be so enlightened and principled, yet they do come off as prejudice against genetically enhanced beings. And again, social commentary. That's good. That's on point. God, such a great episode. And then we have the thing with Dr. Mbega. Now, I have to say that just an inkling, just a small inkling of doesn't like this story because it does seem kind of out of nowhere. Just a little, just a tiny little bit. But for the most part, I fucking love it. For the most part, I think it was amazing. Now, they did foreshadow it with the fact that that this virus got on the ship in the first place in the biofilters, and they were certain, like Himmler was like positive there's no way a virus could get on the ship, and that it's just not going to happen, but this is the explanation. So it does tie into that, and they were foreshadowing that with him are also like tracing down the problem to the medical transporter, and Imbaga being pissed off when he was trying to fuck with it. So yeah, they did foreshadow it, so it wasn't completely out of nowhere, which is why I'm okay with it. But more to the point, it was so damn powerful, and I love how, like, number one kind of passed on, like, the way that Pike was very forgiving to her. She passed that on, like, to what they call paying it forward, like, passed it on to Imbaga and was just as understanding and forgiving. And when he tried to resign, held himself up for disciplinary action, and which would mean the death of his daughter, she was like, absolutely not. You won't do that. I will just get some power diverted to the medical transporter so it doesn't have an issue, doesn't affect our transporters in the future. And again, it tied into another theme of the episode of how people have their secrets, and everyone has their secrets. Like, even in Next Generation, especially Deep Space Nine, people have their secrets. But this was explored in a very thematic way. It was so good. So good. Now, sorry, I'm going to jump back to number one a bit, because when she said, like, if I wasn't, like, such a great valued officer, would I be treated more poorly? And there's actually an example in TNG where we see, yes, that is the case, because what she did, she lied about something on her Starfleet application, her heritage, where she was from, which is forgery, or not forgery, but, perjury. That's what I'm looking for. So she lied, which is against Starfleet regulations and Federation law. And we see in the episode Drumhead, this actually was taken down on this young, lower-level, junior-grade medic who was, in fact, drummed out of Starfleet and his career ruined. In fact, a freaking admiral tried to have him arrested and went after him viciously just because he lied about his Romulan heritage. So this is very consistent with that, and it does kind of answer number one's question. Yeah, if you weren't as valued of an officer, yes, you would be pursued more vigorously. And so that does make you question Starfleet's principles. Of course, that young medical officer did have Picard in his corner, was able to back him up, but he did get, from my understanding, drummed out of Starfleet. But anyway, I know there's B canon that involves him, but I'm not worried about that. Anyhow, because B canon is not canon. Anyway, yeah. So, and yeah, back to Mbaga. Yeah, I gotta admit, I was crying, and when they revealed that his daughter, that what he was doing for his daughter, and if it was such a strong personal story, and I got a strong sense of this character, like, much stronger than, like, I would say all of the characters on Discovery except for Burnham, maybe Saru, I suppose, but after 3 episodes, oh, Jesus Christ, this show is so good. And yeah, and when we was doing the story time with the daughter, because he has to rematerialize her every once in a while so her pattern doesn't degrade, and he has this story time with her. It was so touching. It was so powerful. Yeah, I did shed some tears in that scene. So, damn. My rating for Ghost of Illyria out of 10 is a 10. The best. And I honestly think this is a contender for one of my favorite Trek episodes ever. Maybe I'm jumping the gun being too excited, but no, this is like everything I love from Trek, like powerful character stories, great social commentary, and it has a lot to say, a lot of very complex, smart storytelling where, they're actually slow paced and sitting around talking, and the camera's not fucking spinning and they're going shooting out technobabba at lightning speed. Instead, it's just, this is what Star Trek is. This is what it should be going forward. This is amazing Star Trek. Anyway, that's it for my review of Ghost of Illyria. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to watch this show, which I'm certain will continue to deliver. And, and review it for you every week. And I also cover all other things Star Trek, many other Star Trek shows, and other shows such as Star Wars Rebels, The Expanse, Better Call Saul, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching. Come on. There it is. It's being stupid again.